This week, I want to read a little bit of everything. I want to read something silly. I want to read something serious. I want to read some short fiction. I want to pick up some poetry. I want to read things that make me laugh. I want to read things that wound me, change me, affect the way I see the world. That's a lot of high hopes for this week. This is my reading vlog where I read and I think about things, and I'm excited to see what the stories have in store for me. Welcome to the reading vlog. Wednesday. I realized I forgot to push the record button when I was filming the vlog for last night, but probably that was a good thing because I had very negative thoughts. I was in a very bad mood because the first two books I finished this week were really bad. Well, I did not enjoy them. Art is subjective. The first book I finished was Clap Back, and this is a very interesting critique and take on racial relationships between blacks and whites in America. It's about the legacy of racism, the legacy of slavery, and what we could do to get past the legacy of racism. And what kind of a cure for that prejudice and all those negative effects that come from that prejudice, what that cure would be. And everything was just tackled in such a heavy-handed, and I feel like completely ungrounded way. Let me just say, this is a book written by a black person for black people, and I hated it. It was super heavy-handed. It was super out of touch. And I think the author had an incredibly bleak and pessimistic view of racial relations, like even 50 years from now. It was a very brave work, but she tried to cover so much ground in like 20 pages, and I really feel like though the ideas were grand and the ideas were there, the execution was done very poorly. And I don't understand why this book had such high reviews. It's like between 4 and 5 stars on Amazon because it's so disjointed. And I just absolutely hated it. And it feels bad for me to say that, but it's like one of the first reads of this year that I hated. The other book I read was Moon Woke Me Up 9 Times. It's a collection of haikus by the famous Japanese poet Basho. And I love haikus. I love poetry. Sonnets and haikus, my favorite types of poetry. And this is also very disappointing because I heard so many great things about this poet. Like, oh, he's one of the greats. And I was reading them, and perhaps it's a translation issue. I have to acknowledge that. Perhaps these poems are a lot better, a lot more thought-provoking in Japanese. But in English, I did not think it was very impressive. I'm no professional poet. I do not go to Juilliard for poetry. I'm just a rube. I'm just an uneducated yokel when it comes to poetry. That being said, I did not like this collection. There was a few little quirky, cutesy haikus in there, but nothing that would be like, wow, this is one of the pillars of haikus, because I really feel like a middle schooler could have written a lot of these haikus, but perhaps that's just art has advanced so much in the last 200 years. So the week started off on very much a low point because I was very upset with the first 2 books I read this week because I was like, already read 2 books, but I have negative opinions about it. But then I picked up Tales from the Gas Station by Jack Townsend, and this is a very fun and also thought-provoking read. I was just expecting it to be funny, but it's a very unique read. It tells the story of a man who works at a gas station on the end of town. This is a very strange and unique town. Weird things are always happening, like possessions. There's a cult that lives in the forest. There's a ghost of a cowboy that lives in the gas station bathroom. There's mutated raccoons. People are disappearing. There's doppelgangers. It's basically the Dresden Files, but instead of following a wizard, it's following some terminally ill guy who works at this gas station who just can't even care about what's happening around him because he's focusing on his own mortality. It's very clever. It's very thought-provoking. I love the premise. It's like the first in a 4-book series, and I'm digging it. I'm really digging it. Thursday. I cried this week. I'm almost 300 pages into The Stand, and I've already cried once. Over 1,000 pages to go, and I'm already crying. You encounter a character who's a deaf mute, and he can't relate to his surroundings. And then Stephen King gives you some information about his backstory, about how his parents passed away, and about how after his parents passed away, this deaf mute was completely isolated from the people around him, and he was giving up on life. He was giving up on the whole idea of possibly relating to his peers, relating to those around him, taking part in the great community of humankind. But then he encounters an individual who suffers from the same affliction, and it teaches him how to speak, how to communicate, how to, connect with people outside himself. And I had tears in my eyes. Stephen King's characterization is amongst the best I've ever encountered in literature. Very few people can rival King in that regard. In characterization, one of the easiest ways to build empathy with a character is to give that character a disability. Like in Tales from the Gas Station, our character is terminally ill and he's depressed. Very easy to relate to. In The Stand, this character's a deaf mute. That's a very hard thing to overcome. Very easy to feel empathy for. The other book I started, Terra, book 1, our main character gets put into a virtual reality game. It's a little RPG. And in the real world, he suffers from a form of gigantism, and his skin's like paper thin, and he can't take part in life in a normal way. So he's put into this reality, this virtual reality, where he's finally able to live life in a kind of normal way. Very easy to feel empathy for. All of these books highlight why Clapback, I don't want to rant because I don't want this vlog to be negative, but Clapback pissed me off so much because it was very much supposed to be a Black empowering read. But the author used caricatures, really shallow caricatures that are prevalent in a lot of Black media. Caricatures that I feel like are very regressive, and really, I don't think those caricatures belong in a serious critique of the legacy of slavery, of the legacy of racism. I feel like you're watching a Tyler Perry movie. It's a comedy. It's a satire of a lot of things wrong in the Black community. I'm okay if you're using caricatures in that way. But when you're trying to discuss seriously really important issues relating to racism and race and interracial relationships, I feel like it's not very empowering to use very prevalent, regressive Black caricatures. That's the last thing I'm going to say about Clapback. But the character work in the 3 books I'm reading this week besides that are just astounding. One thing that Terra does very well, the author actually knows what he's talking about when he discusses fighting. One of my biggest pet peeves as a lifelong martial artist is when an author explains combat, especially hand-to-hand combat, and they use the most woohoo nonsense ways to describe it. They give the worst advice. I'm like, if a real life person took these lessons that these books are teaching and tried to apply it to a fight, they would just die. But if you were to read Terra, there's some pretty decent fighting advice in there. I am impressed. I think Tales from the Gas Station perfectly captures the vibe of working at a gas station. One of my best friends worked at a gas station for years, and he had all these crazy stories because gas stations are pretty weird places. Constant people coming in and out. They're open 24 hours usually. A lot of people come pick up random, sketchy things at the gas station. I'm sure every person that works at a gas station has some stories. Saturday, I was watching the UFC fights, enjoying good literature. One of my longtime teammates won a UFC belt, and just over a year ago, another one of my teammates won a UFC belt when I was at another gym in exile, because now I'm back at my home gym. I was somewhere else for a year. But yeah, enjoyed some good books as well, but I'm on an emotional high. Friend won the title. I finished Tales from the Gas Station. I enjoyed the read. It was what I was looking for. Nonsensical and thrilling, surprisingly good writing, lots of interesting thought-provoking passages. I love the protagonist. I love that he's a terminal illness and he's very easy to relate to. I love the funny dialogue. I like the characters. There was lots of plot twists I did not see coming. A very engaging, thrilling story, and it read like a web series, which makes sense because the story is essentially our narrator. We are reading our narrator's blog post. And, it's a little disjointed at times. There's a lot of useless information. There's a lot of nonsense happening that distracts from the plot. It made it a very difficult story to predict. In the last 20 pages, everything came together, but there were still some mysteries left on the table that are going to hopefully be resolved in later installments. I will be continuing on with the series. There's only 3 more books left. It's like a quartet. And I need to see what's happening. It's not like Wayward Pines. I love the Wayward Pines trilogy. That was a very serious, thriller mystery series. And this is a lot more light in tone, but it kind of gives me those same vibes. Like Twilight Zone, like Stranger Things, like what is happening in this small town? What is happening at this gas station? What is exactly is our narrator suffering from? Why is his medical condition so strange? Why is there demons and ghosts and possessions and all these things? So it's like Wayward Pines meets Supernatural with a lot of nonsense thrown in there. And I loved it. I loved it a lot. I will say I really feel like the book ended kind of abruptly. A lot of stuff is happening. There's the climax, very short falling action. It reads almost like a web series, which makes sense because it's blog post. And if you think about it, a blog is just a web series that you're sharing with people. I guess if you think about it, this reading vlog is a web series, technically. But yes, Tales from the Gas Station, very quirky, thought-provoking, thrilling, engaging, mysterious, and just like, what the heck? Lots of what the heck moments. I look forward to seeing this series through till the end. Hopefully, I can be disciplined and actually continue on with a series in a short amount of time. I could read this series before the end of the year. That would be perfect. We'll see if I could find some discipline. Tomorrow, I'm going to finish Nova Terra, and that'll make it a very good week. 4 books in 1 week. 2 books I didn't like. Hopefully the last 2 books will be like good books for me. So what would I think right now, my rating for Tales from the Gas Station is like 3.75 out of 5 stars. Not quite 4 stars, because I feel like this first installment in the series was very much a setup, very much a setup book. But I kind of see where the author's going, and that's compelling. Sunday, the week ended with a bang. 673 pages. I finished Nova Terra, which brings the weekly book count up to 4. 2 stinkers, 2 good books. I loved Nova Terra. 4.5 out of 5 stars. A really good lit RPG adventure that felt like a video game or watching an anime, which are both very nostalgic things for me. I don't have a lot of time to watch anime. I don't have a lot of time to play video games, which is why I started reading. But Nova Terra brought me back to my teen years. But it was still a very mature, thought-provoking, moving read. Emotional highs and lows. I really love the protagonist because he's dealing with like a disability in the real world, as well as a character weakness in the virtual world. In the real world, he has like this lifelong condition that like his skin tears apart. He has a form of gigantism. Very easy to feel bad for our main character. He gets put in the virtual world, and he's kind of like a superhuman. He has no weaknesses. He's overpowered, but he's naive because he's been coddled his entire life. So perhaps he gets taken advantage of. Perhaps he makes bad decisions in this virtual world, in this free-for-all of a virtual reality video game. I love the ending. I look forward to seeing where the series goes. This is the first installment out of a 10-book series. All the books are relatively short, so not too intimidating. I liked it. It had a very similar feel to Cradle by Will White. I had a lukewarm response to the Cradle. Like Will White, I mean, he's not bad, but maybe I just wasn't in the right stage of my life to tackle a lit RPG at that time. But I'm loving Nova Terra, and it actually is giving me a lot of motivation to go back to Cradle and give it a try after I read the first few installments of Nova Terra. I definitely feel like I'm going to finish this series within the next 6 months. It's a very bingeable series. I have a feeling. I love Thorn, our main character. I look forward to seeing where the series goes. I'm very happy that the week ended on a high note because the first 2 reads, I did not enjoy them. I didn't want this vlog to be negative. Luckily, Tales from the Gas Station was a fun time, and Nova Terra was a great time. So this is the week where everything starts off bad but ends up going pretty damn well. 673 pages, 4 books. That is 12 books within the last 2 weeks. I'm finally reaching those booktuber numbers. Also, yeah, if you're on TikTok, check out my Book Talk channel. This week, it was mixed bag, but I'm happy with the way it ended. But I look forward to next week. I look forward to seeing what the stories have in store for me. This week's okay. Next week's going to be great. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll talk to you guys next time.